Welcome to the beginning of Montober, and to kick off our celebration of the 100th anniversary of Nosferatu, I'm going to start off by reviewing the remake from 1979, directed by Werner Herzog. This is a phenomenal remake that is very minimalistic. The score is very simple and effective. The cinematography is simple, but it's beautifully shot. And right off the bat, the film sets a chilling atmosphere with the main theme to the movie and footage of mummified plague victims that they shot at, I believe, a museum. This film just unsettles you from the beginning. And it's a great slow burn. I can actually, if you don't like this one and said it's boring, I can kind of understand because it's very methodically paced. We go from the opening, and for those that don't know, the original was basically the first Dracula movie, but they changed the name to Count Orlok because they couldn't get the rights and they altered a few things around. Where in this film, Werner Herzog just flat out, it's Dracula. So just for understand now, I will be referring to the vampire as Count Orlok. In a good part of the beginning of the film is Jonathan traveling to Transylvania to bring Count Orlok the deed to the house he purchased. And the journey is, again, really good. It's beautifully shot. The great score kicks in at certain points. One of my favorite scenes when he's walking, he's going down this path through a mountain, and there's this rushing river and there's a rail with ropes, and he looks at it and he has this moment of realization: if I fall in there, I'm dead. And they even set up the dread and fear around the castle and Count Orlok. He can't even get a horse and carriage willing to take him there, and he's being warned, don't go. And it's just a nice setup to when we finally meet Count Orlok and he has a meal for him planted. This is the Dracula story. I'm not going to go into all the beats for beats, but I do like this. And while there's one scene where Count Orlok is feeding on Jonathan, and it's like there's a psychic connection between him and Lucy, and Orlok senses that connection and senses Lucy. It's a great scene. This movie, ironically, well, first, before I get into that, because I can't even think of the name for the movie, and I'm not going to see it, but it's relevant because it involves Klaus Kinski, who played the vampire. Klaus Kinski had a reputation for just being a very nasty individual with an explosive temper. One of the few friends he actually had was Werner Herzog, and I believe Herzog did a documentary about him. But there was one movie they were filming, and I believe it was at a village in Africa, and Klaus Kinski was being his typical nasty, temperamental self. And needless to say, people didn't like it, and some villagers actually came up to Werner Herzog, and they were like, if this guy gets to be too much of a problem with you, we can talk to someone, and for a few dollars, no one will know what happened to him. He was literally that bad that people in the area actually, asked the director, do you want us to have him killed for you? So that's the type of person we're dealing with here, but he did a great performance. And one thing I really like when you look at it, I found out, when you see the vampire nails he has are like this long, and he was actually insistent on being fitted with them long before the filming began because he wanted to just adjust to having the long fingernails, which would naturally get in the way. And like the scene where he first meets Jonathan and he pours him water from a bottle, the way he grabs the bottle, and then same thing, he pulls the cap with the palm of his hand and pours it. You can tell he was well practiced on doing everyday thing with those nails and just committing it to muscle memory how they wouldn't get in the way. And it was a brilliant touch. The cinematography, like I said, is amazing in this film. And believe it or not, but the biggest threat in the movie is not Nosferatu Count Orlok. It's the rats he brings with him because the rats have the plague. And it tears through this village like wildfire. Why, after Orlok leaves, Jonathan gets into a race to get back, and him and Nosferatu show up at around the same time, only Jonathan's been bitten, he's slowly being turned into a vampire. Meanwhile, the plague is spreading through the town, and Lucy, through finding a book Jonathan had with him, is beginning to figure out what's really happening. And like even the town's government has fallen apart. The council's dead, the mayor's dead, and she's trying to go to people and they're like, there's no one official in charge anymore. And it's just chilling the way it's done. It just really is. And they're probably the most chilling in probably one of the most chilling scenes I've ever seen in any horror movie is when Lucy's going through town and she's actually consecrating the coffins full of dirt that Orlok brought to town with him that had the rats in them, and it's also where he rests during the day because the vampire needs to rest on its native soil. She goes through the town square and there's people dancing and celebrating. Someone's even trying to dance with her. And there's these people at a big dinner table with tons and tons of rats crawling all over their feet. And I'll say that if you get creeped out by rats, this is not the movie for you. And one of them offers her a glass of wine and he's like, we all have the plague. This is our last meal and we're trying to enjoy ourselves. And it's the chilling implication of the fact that those people are just dancing and partying in the streets. It's because they know they're going to be dead in a matter of hours and they just want to live it up one last time. Van Helsing's in this movie and he's pretty useless. He doesn't do much. It's Lucy who sacrifices herself to kill the vampire, exposing him to sunlight, and his death scene it's a very painful death that he suffers. And then Van Helsing stakes the vampire, and Jonathan sees it, who's kind of hemmed in a corner because Lucy quashed up communion ravers and put them in a semicircle around the chair so he can't get up. At the end, I'm not going to spoil all the details of the ending, but this is a film where, nothing good happens to anyone. It's the hardest kind of ending to pull off and make it a satisfying ending. Lucy's dead, Van Helsing is being taken to jail even though there's no one at the jail and it's just an old man escorting him. The plague is still spreading through the town like wildfire and it's only a matter of time before everyone dies. Even though Count Orlok is dead, he still more or less wins. I kind of wondered with the plague, is it like, does the plague make the blood of his victims taste better? It was kind of a weird thing. Like, why would you bring something in that's going to kill your food source? But it was a great addition to the movie, even if the rats were not treated the best. Animals were harmed during the making of this movie. When you watch it, like, the coloring of the rats just doesn't look natural, and it's because they purchased hordes and hordes of laboratory rats that were white, and they dyed them gray. Only to get the dye to stick, they had to dip the rats in just really hot water with the dye in it, and it actually scalded many a rat to death. I know not many people are going to cry over the death of a rat, but it's still an interesting fact about this movie. A movie that proves you can be minimalist and still be chilling. This movie would not be successful today. Today's instant gratification, cut and paste assembly line audience would disregard this movie as boring and with dull and without imagination. But Werner Herzog, who believed the original was the most important German horror film of all time, he wanted to remake it. This was a passion project, and he created a true masterpiece, even though it's a remake. And this is another one of those films, whenever people bring up movies should not be remade, I'm like, yeah, but if you go by that, we never would have gotten this film. It's a great remake that these two films make phenomenal companions to one another. And I give this film a solid A. I would give it an A plus, but this is one where taking my feelings for the film out and being objective and realizing some might find this a little boring, but I still love the film. Probably next is going to be the kind of black comedy Shadow of the Vampire, which is a fictional account of the making of the movie. And ironically enough, Willem Dafoe, who plays the vampire in this, from what I understand, he's playing Count Orlok in an up-and-coming remake of Nosferatu, so that's a cool full circle. So, like, share, comment, subscribe, over and out, Montober continues.